Clear to close ASAP.
Welcome to the Clear to Close ASAP podcast. I am sitting here with my good friend, Marko Trickovic. He has been in the housing industry in general for 23 plus years. That includes mortgages, but the majority of that has been as a realtor for 20 years. And he services the east part of the Phoenix Valley, including Chandler, Gilbert, Mesa, Queen Creek, Santan Valley, and even Scottsdale and Tempe. Is that right, Marko?
Yep, that's correct.
So what we're talking about lately, what the buzz has been lately, of course, is the interest rates have been coming up in 2022. The good news is that as of late November, they have seemed to top out a little bit, which is obviously a good thing. It makes housing more affordable for those who are seeking it. But how has that changed the market overall from what you're seeing?
The funny thing is I actually haven't seen this in all my time in real estate. Obviously, I went through the 2008 crash, but if you remember, there was kind of a slow progression, right? It was really from like 06 to about 08 where things started to kind of, and then obviously all the firms, you know, went belly up and stuff like that.
Slow motion crash. If you
right.
will. Okay.
Right. So there was a time period there where, like, you know, I think some people were able to prepare for it and whatnot. This time around, the market completely shifted, right?
In a very quick manner.
I mean, it was like a button, man, or a switch. Like they turned it was on and they turned it off, and it was literally overnight. And you know, talking to a lot of my colleagues, no one's ever seen this. Like, no one could really be prepared for it. I was predicting a downturn in the market. I just didn't predict it this fast. But yes, it was a switch, right? And it literally shifted. So we went from an absolutely insane seller's market. You know, there was clients sometimes where I'd have to work with them for 2 or 3 months to get them into a house, because you had to put so many bids on properties. You were just getting outbid. It was like a slot machine, right? It was one big gamble.
Yeah.
You had no negotiating power.
Right.
That was completely taken out. So it was like, you know, really you were having conversations like, how much are you willing to pay for this house? And how much are you willing to go above this asking price, right?
And it doesn't matter what the appraisal comes in at, because people were paying over appraisals. So
absolutely.
That's very, very bad for buyers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good for sellers.
Yep.
It's a zero-sum game, whereas somebody wins and somebody loses. Now the switch has flipped, as you mentioned, and you have sellers now begging buyers, please come and view my house. It's almost gone from an unhealthy extreme to another unhealthy extreme.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And so what we're also talking about today is, for buyers, how do you structure a purchase contract in this environment?
So I'd say there's probably 2 different ways right now, right? So one way that you can go in is obviously, with the inventory being as high as it is, you literally have multiple properties to choose from and they're just not moving. Obviously, as a buyer, that gives you all the power in the world, but there's 2 different ways. Either you're price conscious and you're trying to get the best possible deal and the most amount of money off of this property, or I think what you're seeing right now is, with interest rates, you know, kind of climbing back up to where they are, you know, you could definitely negotiate sellers to actually contribute towards their closing costs, so they can use that money to actually buy those interest rates down.
Good point.
Because if you're payment conscious, then that's probably one of the better routes to go, because at least it locks you into a lower interest rate than what people are paying for. Especially because we don't know. It's a lot of uncertainty in the market right now. So if you're looking to get a lower rate, it makes more sense to pay less in interest, in my personal opinion.
Of course, yeah.
So I would, you know, I would think that's probably the best option right now. But believe it or not, you probably can negotiate a little bit of both. You're probably also going to be able to negotiate a lot of repairs and things that normally, you know, even 6 months ago you just couldn't do, right?
Yep.
Sellers were looking at it and saying, I'm not gonna fix anything. You take it as is, and that's how this goes. So buyers really need to understand that right now, I think, is the perfect time to try to buy a home, because all the power's in their hands.
Okay, great point. Now, what you hear a lot is people saying, well, I'm going to wait for interest rates to come down, then I'm going to buy my house. And that's kind of this fear-based mentality. What I'm hearing you say is, yes, interest rates are higher, but you can use that to your advantage and tell the seller, hey, interest rates are up in the high 6s. I want you to buy down my interest rate to something in the mid 6s, maybe even the low 6s. Now your high interest rate concern is alleviated, and you're getting a great deal on the house, and you're putting a bid on a house, in a buyer's market when there's no other bids out there except yours?
Absolutely.
Okay.
But it's real estate there's no secret sauce to it. When it comes down to being a realtor, my job is to do the best job that I can for my client, negotiate the best possible deal, and more importantly, protect them in the transaction.
Okay. What do you say to somebody who, they're a first-time home buyer, they don't understand the difference between a buyer's market and a seller's market, and they're looking to you for advice, guidance on what can I, for lack of a better term, what can I get away with here? I don't want to ask for the moon because I'm afraid that I'm going to scare the seller away if I ask him to come down, $20,000 on his price, if I ask them to pay all my closing costs, if I ask them to buy down my interest rate. Where do you draw the line where that's concerned?
It's really dependent. You have to look at multiple factors. A good realtor will be able to ask questions to the listing agent, for example, to find out, what's the motivation of the seller? What's their situation? How bad do they need out of this property?
That's fair.
So, a lot of times they'll give you some information. They don't want to give you the world because that's how negotiations work.
Correct.
Right?
They don't want to show all their cards.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So it comes down to somebody just being able to ask the right questions, through the years, trial and error and things like that.
Sure,
That's how you learn. Really, it's an investigative process, and that'll kind of give you an idea. Okay, this is kind of where they're at, and you'll kind of structure the offer based off of that and your client's needs, obviously. There it'll be maybe a little bit of push-pull, but eventually you can negotiate a deal that works for everybody.
Okay. What have you been seeing as far as time on the market, how soon sellers are coming down on their price, how much they're coming down on their price, how willing they've been to negotiate? What have you been seeing recently? What have you seen in the past couple months in that regard?
Number one, you're seeing a lot of properties that are coming in under comps, and comparables are kind of relative at this point because with the market doing what it's doing, you kind of have a basis of what to look at. You get an idea of what the property is actually worth. But in today's market, sometimes it's better to kind of price it a little bit under that to try to gain immediate traction because you're looking for activity. So if I'm representing a seller, I have to have a different conversation right now. And I have to be honest with my sellers. Right now, you're basically chasing the ball down the hill. And
it's a good analogy.
And your hope is that you get ahead of the ball, because if you're not prepared for that, the property is just going to sit on the market, and eventually you're either going to end up with a cancel listing or an expired listing or whatever it is. But if you have a seller that understands this concept, and I'm honest with my sellers, I tell them, hey, listen, this is the game right now. And so every week we're going to have a price drop, hoping to get ahead of that ball, right? Until we get the buyer. Because at the end of the day, the house is only worth what the market's willing to pay for it. And that's just a fact.
When you talk about comps, first of all, a lot of people out there might not understand what that terminology means.
Right.
Comps stands for comparables, and comparables are homes in the area at a similar price point, similar style, similar number of bedrooms, same square footage, roughly, how much those have sold for. And what people don't understand is that when an appraiser comes in, they're looking at homes that sold last year or in the past 6 months or maybe even 12 months ago.
Right.
So those homes were selling while the market was hot, while it was a seller's market. Now that we've flipped markets, it's going to make sense that those homes, those comps, are going to come in higher than where you're currently listing your house. So it's unrealistic as a seller to look at this and say, wait a minute, the comps down the street from me sold for $800,000. Why shouldn't I be listing my house for $800,000 right now? Well, you shouldn't be doing that because the market has turned since that comp sold.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Is that accurate? Okay.
And to your point, what appraisers do is they do something called market adjustments, right?
Okay.
So depending on where the market is, and in this case, it's obviously trending down, appraisers are also going to they're going to take that into consideration. They're going to make price adjustments because of that as well, because you're in a declining market now, right?
Okay.
And so a lot of people don't understand that. And that's how appraisers are different than us. Like as realtors, we just look at comparables, right? They make adjustments based off of what the market is actually doing. And it's on every single appraisal.
But the price that the comps have actually sold for 6 months ago, you can't change that on the appraisal.
No.
They sold for what they sold for. You have to look at when they sold. So again, buyers coming into this market, they're obviously going to try to take advantage of that.
they have a lot of power right now. And I think that's what they need to realize. Don't wait, because if interest rates happen to go, I mean, where are they going to go? We don't know, right? But what if interest rates go up to 8%, 9%, right? It's not out of the realm of possibility.
Think about where the average seller is in the Phoenix area with regard to how much equity they have in their home. The average seller has been in their home for how many years, you think?
I would say 3 to 5 years is a normal thing.
So say that you have an average seller out there who they have to sell their home because they got a job transfer to Minnesota and they have to leave Arizona. They've been in their house for 5 years, let's just say. They've seen the value of their house climb significantly since they bought it. They have the equity to give up. They have the room to move down in their price because they're sitting on so much equity, and buyers have to understand that.
And to that point, the sellers also need to understand that it's still a win. You're still selling your house for more money than you bought it for.
They're not upside down. And so a lot of the sellers, I would say 90+% of the sellers, are in a situation where they're sitting on a lot of equity, which means that they have room to move down.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. These people are sitting on mountains of equity. We've never been at this point in America where people have sat on this much equity before. And it's because it was a long period of growth. Now, you know, the whole COVID pandemic and things like that, it seemed like everybody was sitting at home and decided they don't want to live in their houses. So they decided they wanted to buy new houses. And that kind of helped really kind of go a little nuts for 2 years there, right? And that's where I think that we need to be able to settle kind of to those pre-COVID price points. And that's what we're starting to do. That's where you're seeing the market kind of correct. And it's not a bad thing. It just means that it probably shot up a little too high and it needs to come back to where it was supposed to be initially.
Well, not to mention the fact that the low interest rates really kind of fueled the fire.
Oh, 100%.
So if any buyers out there are interested in getting in contact with you, how would they go about that?
You know, the best way to honestly do it is just call me or text me, 480-232-1485. Again, that's 480-232-1485. Search for myazhome.com is my website. It allows you to actually search properties in the MLS. It's a direct feed. A little bit better than Zillow, obviously, because Zillow kind of has a delay. They have outdated information at times because they don't actually pay for their MLS access. My website is actually updated every 24 hours, so it's pretty on point.
Okay, so that's search for myazhome.com.
Yes.
Okay, great. And then how about an email address for you, Marko?
It's just my last name, Trickovic, T as in Tom, RICKOVIC, 98@gmail.com.
Okay, sounds great. Well, thanks for coming on. I appreciate you, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is great information for any buyers out there, and even for sellers, you know, who need to understand the market that we're in, how to list their homes accordingly.
Absolutely.
So cool. Thanks for coming on.
All right, thank you.